Simon sets the pace. You follow right along. Light the lights that Simon lights, or he'll tell you that you're wrong. Simon's a computer. Simon has a brain. You either do what Simon says, or else go down the drain. Simon is a master. He tells you what to do. But you can master Simon if you follow every clue. And if you think Simon's fun at the party, wait till you play it alone.
Simon with 5 ways to play from MB Electronics.
Hello, everybody. I am excited to show you today another vintage toy that I got myself recently. This is a Milton Bradley Simon game, and it was made in 1987. I bought this on eBay a few weeks ago, and funny thing, I just got it today because I was just reminded today that I bought it. For the first time ever, I bought something on eBay and then completely forgot I bought it. And then today I got a notification on my phone that was like, hey, give the seller feedback. And I'm like, oh crap, that's been sitting at the post office. So I've actually only had this thing for a day. This might be the quickest I've ever made a video of something after retrieving it. But yeah, I probably don't have to explain to you what Simon is. This is one of the most famous and well-known toys in history. Milton Bradley introduced Simon in 1978, and it was just an instant hit, and they've been making it almost continuously since then. You can still buy the modern version of this today, and the premise is exactly the same. Of course, the modern ones get all fancy with, you know, the sounds and music they play and stuff, but the game has never changed. It's never had to, because this was just an incredibly popular toy, and it endures to this day, whether in physical form or as an app, or a computer program, or stuff like that. If you've never used one of these, it's an electronic memory game. You got the 4 colored buttons here, and if you've ever played Simon Says, it's that premise. It lights up a button, you repeat it back, then it lights up the same button plus another one, you repeat that back, and it goes on and on and on until you either max out the limit, or more likely you mess up. The creators of Simon came up with the game after playing an arcade game by Atari called Touch Me. The premise was similar. The machine would play an ever-lengthening sequence that you had to repeat back, but the two men found the game unengaging to play. The buttons and lights were all the same color, and the sounds were harsh and unpleasant. In addition, they found the noisy atmosphere of an arcade terrible for trying to memorize patterns. The game was simply unenjoyable. They decided they could create a similar game in a device that was more pleasant visually, orally, and that could be played in the home, and that was Simon. No mention about the terrible name of Atari's product. Of course, this was the same company who created Gotcha, an arcade game whose controllers were very anatomical, to put it mildly. The reason I wanted one of these was YouTube recommended a video of someone repairing one of these. And when I was a kid in the 2000s, I had the modern version of the time Simon game. It was a lot smaller than this, pretty little yellow thing. And I was reminded that I had that. I think I donated it to the thrift store a few years ago. And I saw this video of someone fixing a vintage one, and I thought, geez, I'd kind of like to have one. So I bought one. I paid $26 for this, plus shipping, and it works perfectly. The only thing I had to do was the speaker inside it. I don't know if it became dislodged during shipping or if it was already dislodged and the seller just didn't know, but the speaker was just swinging around inside the unit. So I put that back in its little clip that it's supposed to be clipped onto. The label, this nice metal label, was the adhesive had failed and it was only being held on by the 3 switches here. So I just removed the switches. They just pulled the label off, put it upside down on a piece of cardboard, lightly sprayed it with some 3M Super 77 spray adhesive, stuck it back on. Bob's your uncle. Now the label's fixed. That's all I had to do. It's in pretty much perfect shape. It's got some black stains on the blue and yellow buttons here. I tried with alcohol. I couldn't get them to go away, but that's okay. Very minor blemishes for something that has survived 35 years. And what's really cool is a lot of these, I don't think I have to explain how popular these were. These were incredibly popular, and today there are hundreds of these on eBay, many of them with their original boxes, and indeed, I got this in the original box. How cool is that? And it's a nice box too, very sturdy, very thick. It's probably why so many of these survived with their boxes, is because it's like the box to a board game. It kind of encourages you to just keep the unit in the box when you're not using it. It's really not built like something you would throw away after you open the thing on Christmas Day. So very nice, and we will look more at the box later. So Simon was introduced in 1978, and the original run went until I think 1981 or 82, and then I think they stopped for a few years. And then in 1986, they actually reissued it and started making it again. And this is one of those 1986 reissues. The 1986 reissue is actually physically and cosmetically identical to the 1978 version. The only cosmetic thing that you have to tell a 1986 reissue apart is that the original run, some of the original run, the earliest units of the original run, instead of this smooth ring, you can see this little trapezoid shaped ring on each of the buttons. Instead of it just being a ring, it was actually filled in. It was all smooth inside it. The earliest Simon units were built that way, and then in the middle of the original run, they changed to this ring design, and they kept that going for the 1986 reissue. Another thing they changed, I don't think this was also introduced with the 1986 reissue. I think this was done in the middle of the original run. They actually slightly redesigned the sound. The reason I wanted a 1986 reissue, which I did, I specifically sought out a Simon of this age, is because they sound nicer than the original run of units. The original run of units, they had a little more primitive sound design, and instead of a continuous beep, it sounds like a really short beep repeated over and over that they make, and I just find it not quite as nice. In the middle of that run and with the 1986 run, they sort of redesigned the sound. It now makes a continuous beep. It sounds very pleasant. Full range speaker in this thing. I don't think it's a square wave. I think it's like a triangle wave. Like they did a good job making these sound just really pleasant to the ear when you're using them, and we'll see that later. So I specifically sought out a 1986 reissue because I wanted to make sure I was getting one that had the revised sound circuitry that, in my opinion, sounds nicer. I'm not sure how long they made the reissue. They stopped in either the late 80s or early 90s. In 1993 or 94, they actually completely redesigned the unit for the first time. It was the same size, And actually the control layout was the same, and I suspect the circuitry inside was actually the same. But the housing was now translucent, the buttons were translucent, and the logo and stuff, the label was redesigned, but otherwise it was the same. And they made that unit until the late 90s, I think. And then they came out with another completely redesigned, the little small yellow one of the 2000s, like the one I had. Beginning in 1980, they made a variation called Pocket Simon, which is exactly what it sounds like. It was the exact same premise, worked exactly the same, all the controls were the same, but it was in a much smaller housing. And that mostly followed the same design guidelines. They made the Pocket Simon they made the original Pocket Simon throughout the 1980s. And then in 93 or 94, or maybe 95 for the Pocket Simon, they redesigned it with that translucent case design. And then by the early 2000s, they had actually gotten rid of the Pocket Simon because the original Simon, the yellow one, like I had, was just so significantly tiny compared to the original that there was no need of having a separate normal Simon and Pocket Simon. It's funny, the Simon I had as a kid, when I think about that and how small it was, I look at this today, this thing is huge. It's a giant flying saucer of a thing. Really, really nice, feels like really nice construction. It just feels like something that that would last, and that's why this has lasted 35 years, and that's why pretty much all of these, right back to the original units from 1978, 45 years on, they're all still working fine. It's very rare that anything goes wrong on these. The worst thing that happens is corroded battery terminals or the incandescent lamps burn out. And Milton Bradley actually designed and encouraged the user to open it up and replace the bulbs if they ever had to. Pretty cool. Here's the box. Very nice box, like I mentioned earlier. And this box art, and as a matter of fact, the majority of stuff on the entirety of the box did not change between the original 1978 run and the 1986 reissue. So we're not missing anything history-wise by the fact that I got a 1986 reissue. So let's take a look. Simon, a computer-controlled game. Think fast, Simon says repeat my flashing lights and sounds. Milton Bradley Electronics, ages 7 to adult, 1 or more players, batteries required, not included. 5 ways to play for fast and furious play action. See back. I was kind of racking my brain thinking where they got 5 ways from, because there's only 3 game modes. And then I realized Game 1 is for 1 player only. Game 2 is for 2 players. And then Game 3 can be for either 2, 3, or 4 players. There's your 5. But there you go. And we look at the edge here. Program Simon. Follow the signals. Simon calls your bluff. Buzz. Copyright 1978 by Milton Bradley Company under Berne and Universal Copyright Conventions. Don't know what that means, but I know what that means. Made in USA. Yes, this is an American-made electronic toy. Very, very cool. So, the year 1978 is all over this thing, both the box and the toy itself, despite this being a 1986 reissue. For that reason, almost all of these that you see on eBay, everybody puts 1978 in the title or description or whatever. Everybody just goes straight for the 1978. Look at how old this thing is, and you can buy it for the low, low price of whatever. It's just the copyright year, because that's when the toy was introduced. People just, make assumptions. So be mindful. I've already shown you ways you can distinguish the original run from the later units on the toy itself. There's other ways on the box, which I'll show you right now. Let's take a look at the back. And Let's read the little blurb we've got. My name is Simon. I am a computer with a remarkable memory. I challenge you to repeat my ever-increasing sequences of flashing lights and electronic sounds. I have thousands of random sequences to test your powers of concentration in 3 fascinating games and 4 varying skill levels. Play solo or in groups. There are 5 fun-filled ways to play for 1 or more challengers. And that blurb never changed from the original 1978 box. And it shows the different ways, the 3 different game modes. Game 1, Simon says, for 1 or more players, repeat an ever-increasing sequence of flashing lights and sounds on 4 skill levels. Compete against Simon yourself. For multiple play, 2 or more players must team up against Simon or compete against each other. Game 2, player says, for 1 or more players. Oh, I didn't know you could play Game 2 alone. Let's find out how. Play by yourself, creating your own sequence of flashing lights and sounds. Select your own signals. Make the sequence as easy or difficult as you wish. For multiple play, 2 or more players take turns repeating their opponent's sequence, always adding 1 more signal with each turn. So a nice little twist on the way to play it. And then game 3, choose your color for 2, 3, or 4 players. A color elimination game for 2, 3, or 4 players. Players are responsible for pressing assigned color lenses at certain times to repeat the sequence correctly. Game 3 is a pretty cool mode. We will demonstrate that. 1 9-volt transistor battery and 2 D-size batteries required. We recommend alkaline or heavy-duty batteries for best performance. Yeah, this thing needs 2 different types of batteries to feed it. The 9-volt runs the microcontroller, and the 2 D cells run the incandescent lights and the speaker amplifier. Printed circuit board made in Singapore. Well, we couldn't win it all, could we? But that's okay. Now, the back of the box, if you're wanted to get one of these on eBay, is actually the best way to determine if it's an original run or a 1986 run. The original, the very earliest Simon games, everything that's on this box is just, I think it's just this, or it might have the game types too, but it's just, there's no advertisements. You can see we have an advertisement for Electronic Battleship and an advertisement for Pocket Simon. In the earliest units, we didn't have this. Pocket Simon didn't even exist yet. So you had just this taking up the entire box. Some of them are black and white. Some of them are printed in color. I would assume the black and white ones are the very earliest run, but that's only an assumption on my part. I could be wrong. In the late 70s or early 80s, they went to this design for the back of the box. They had the Pocket Simon, but then on the left they had an advertisement for Milton Bradley's Microvision, which was a very weird, almost proto Game Boy type thing. So yeah, you have the Microvision and then the Pocket Simon. And then for the 1986 reissue, you had Electronic Battleship and the Pocket Simon. So that's a way to tell when a unit is from. I did a neurodivergently large amount of research looking at eBay listings and YouTube videos to figure this out. I'm the first person to have divulged this information. The original owner kept the original literature in the box too. Pretty cool. Here's the manual for the unit. It's copyright 1984. On the back it actually says revision 2 of 79. So they never really had to change it because the way the game works never actually changed up to this point. And it's pretty cool. On page 7, they do give you instructions on how to disassemble the unit so that you can change the light bulbs. And we will take a look inside the unit in a bit. They are T 3 1/4, 2.5 volt wedge base bulbs. And for the princely sum of $1, shipping included, Milton Bradley would send you 2 of those bulbs. The other piece of literature is a warranty registration card. Pretty cool. Personal thanks from Milton Bradley for trying this product. Now, if you liked or disliked it, will you tell us about it? And, whoops. It's kind of funny. So much stuff was like this. My Electrolux vacuum cleaner, which came with the original, I forget if it was a warranty registration or just like a feedback card or what. This is the same way. They ask for an odd amount of personal information. They want your name, where you live. They want your, I'd like to say gender, but let's face it, they want your sex, your relationship status, how old you are, how many children you have, how many are sons and daughters, the ages of your children, who purchased it, who was it for, how'd you find out about Simon, did you see a TV commercial? I mean, I can see why they ask most of this stuff, but some of the personal information, weird. Your total family income, well, it's so weird. You don't see this anymore, for good reason. And kind of funny, you address it to Gene Lewis at Milton Bradley. This was definitely a sign of previous times when your warranty registration card would be addressed to a single individual at the company. Kind of funny. So let's take a look at the unit itself. With the controls, we've got the switch for game 1, 2, or 3. And we've got 4 different skill levels. Just as an example, for game 1, the skill level is how long of a sequence Simon will throw at you before telling you you won the game. Skill level 1 is a sequence of 8. Skill level 4 is a sequence of 32. Once you've selected your game and your skill level, you press start to start the game. When you're not in a game, you can press last to view the last sequence that you completed up to the point where you lost. And then you can press the longest button for the longest sequence that you were able to complete. And that longest sequence is stored for as long as the unit is turned on. And you get your power switch. Looking at the back, your 2 battery compartments for the 2 different types of batteries that this thing requires. They improved the battery cover design a lot in the 1986 reissue, and this is another way, I forgot to mention, that you can tell an original run unit from a 1986 reissue. The original run units, instead of the usual squeeze tabs that you squeeze to remove the battery covers, it was the type where you had to insert a flathead screwdriver. And that obviously was not a great design because a lot of original run units that I've seen on eBay, they have tape holding the battery covers in place. So clearly it was not a great design. This redesign for the 1986 reissue, probably a great improvement in terms of durability. But, see if I can do this with one hand. There's your 2 D-cell batteries for the lights and the speaker amplifier. The manual doesn't say anything about mixing brands, so I acted accordingly. And your 9-volt battery compartment, and it does work with rechargeables perfectly fine. Made in USA, 4850 was, I think, the model number. Copyright 1978, Milton Bradley. Electronic module, made in USA. And a patent number. Your speaker right there, that is like a 2-inch, or I think it's a 2-inch full range speaker. This thing sounds nice, and it's also very loud. Important! Remove 3 slide switch covers from control panel before disassembling for light bulb replacement. So, let's pretend to do that light bulb replacement right now. The thing to do is do as it says, pull these off. 1, 2, 3. And on the bottom, there are 4 screws to remove. So let me remove those. When your screws are out, flip the unit back over And the cover comes off just like that. And there we go. You see a pretty simple looking circuit board. These buttons are just loose. The switches are the metal leaf spring type switches. We saw those in the video of the Coleco Pac-Man. And 2 different integrated circuits. Only a few passive components. And our wedge bulbs. These are GE number 127 bulbs. And I am not the first person to go inside this thing. And the reason I know that is because not all of the 4 screws are the same. One of them's actually different. It's a bigger screw. It actually doesn't come out. It just kind of stays in there, although it does hold the unit together. And if you look on the PCB, we have 1, 2, 3 screws holding it, and a missing screw. Ooh, someone went inside this thing back in the day, probably to replace a bulb, lost a screw, stole a screw from the PCB, stuck it there. Fair enough, the unit still works. I'm not gonna worry about it, but that's kind of funny. Now, the original design Simon did not always use these wedge bulbs. The original run actually had screw-in bulbs like you have on those like you had on those dollar store lanterns back in the day. Just a little miniature screw-in 3-volt bulbs. That's what the original run of these had. And for the either later in the original run or for the 1986 reissue, they went to these wedge-shaped bulbs. Not sure why. Maybe the wedge-shaped bulbs are brighter. They're certainly bigger physically than the original screw-in bulbs. In this little pocket right here, they actually gave you a spare bulb. That's how much faith they had in the consumer being able to replace bulbs. The unit actually shipped with a spare bulb in here. As for these chips, the main microcontroller, or the microcontroller, it's a custom branded chip. We don't know what it is. It just says MB4850 and a date code of 15th week of 87. This chip is likely a custom ASIC, an application-specific integrated circuit, but the original run actually used the Texas Instruments TMS-1000 microcomputer on a chip. In fact, Simon was one of many toys at this time that employed the TMS-1000, including Texas Instruments' own Speak and Spell. Simon's massive popularity made it more economical to design a custom chip that could implement the same functionality. This chip is actually a standard off-shelf part. It is a DS75494N hex driver chip, hex display driver. It's basically 6 NAND gates in a single package. And having not removed this and looked at the bottom, what I'm guessing they're doing is they're using these NAND gates to drive the 4 light bulbs and the speaker. Now, I'm not sure on that because the 75494 datasheet says that this chip is only capable of sourcing 150 milliamps of current. It was actually designed to drive LEDs. And these are incandescent lamps, and they are rated at 1/4 of an amp. So my best guess is either I'm completely wrong as to what they're doing with this chip, or they are simply overdriving the chip, and they're doing that based on confidence that because none of the lights are ever lit up for a very long time, that the chip won't burn out. But yeah, that's a completely random guess on my part. I have a little bit of a background in electronics. Obviously, I've got a degree in the stuff. But that's my best guess, is that the microcontroller basically uses this chip to be able to turn on one of the lamps, or the speaker it will. I'm guessing what they're doing with the speaker is maybe the microcontroller is generating the frequency and just turning the NAND gate on and off at that frequency. That's my best guess as to what's going on. I could be 1,000,000% wrong. But that's what's inside this thing anyhow. There's the speaker. Really nice beefy speaker. Really big magnet on it for a 2-inch speaker. And yeah, when I got this thing, I moved it around and heard a clunk, clunk, clunk. And sure enough, the speaker slides into... Let me see, can I turn... my battery's low. Let me charge my phone a bit and then I'll give you a look with the light. While my phone was charging, I decided to just unscrew the PCB and look at it, and it turns out I was exactly right. They're using this NAND gate chip as basically an electronic relay. The microcontroller basically tickles the individual NAND gates, and attached directly to the output of those NAND gates are each of the light bulbs and the speaker. And that's very interesting that they chose to use a NAND gate logic chip in this sort of fashion, especially because the chip is underrated for the loads that it's carrying. They must just have designed it with the confidence that it wasn't going to burn out. That's super interesting. Also, very impressed with myself that I managed that. But yeah, pretty cool. And if I put it back down here, there's our speaker. 8 ohms, 1/4 of a watt. And yeah, if you want to remove it, you just press down this clip down here and it slides out. For some reason, it was out and just knocking all over the place, which is weird because now that I've inserted it into the unit, it's pretty darn tight in there. But yeah, there you go. Look inside of this thing. So let me put it all back together, and then we'll actually play with it a bit. Alright, let's play a vintage Simon. I'm excited. I'm going to start on game number 1, which is the just the normal Simon game. So we'll turn the unit on. I'm set to skill level 2, because so far that seems to be the right skill level for me. I've won 1 or 2 games on skill level 2, and that's it. So, let's hit start and see how I do. You can see the lights and sounds are just really pleasant. Well, there it is. That's the normal Simon game. It's just so pleasant to use. It sounds pleasant. The glow of the incandescent lamps behind these colored lenses is pleasant. I just love it. It's just such a sensory pleasing experience. Now, it's not very loud right now. In fact, it's quiet enough for my liking because that speaker's on the bottom and it's being covered by this soft footstool. If I start a game and I lift it up, it gets much louder. I love that sound it makes when you lose. It's like it's blowing a raspberry at you. It's just so cute. And another thing it does is if you accidentally leave it turned on without touching anything for like a minute or so, it'll actually yell at you to say, hey, turn me the heck off if you're done. like that. So let's play a game on game 2. So game 2 is the game where you make the sequence yourself. And it gives you the first one to begin with. And then you add each subsequent one yourself. So if I do this, now I gotta hit the next button. And I'm playing by myself, making up the sequence. And so on. It's kind of funny because you could win it just by doing, whoops. You could win it just by hitting the button it gives you over and over. Done. I win. And then game 3, I can't demonstrate properly because I have no friends to play this with me. No friends here anyway. But with game 3, let's say you have 4 players, each person is assigned a certain button, and so you're all working together to repeat the sequence. And it's really cool because if someone flubs up, they are removed from the game, and Simon starts over. It continues the game with a new sequence that only uses the 3 other lenses, not the person that lost. So if I pretend to be 4 people here, oops. So yellow screwed up. So it's going to start a new sequence not using yellow. So it's a game of elimination. And then red lost. So now it's down to just green and blue. Oops. So blue won. So yeah, really nice take on the game. If you have a bunch of people to play it with. Very cool. Well, that is all there is to show of this Milton Bradley Simon game from 1987. I really love this thing. I kind of bought it on a whim. Watching a video of someone fixing one just kind of tickled my brain, reminded me of the one I had as a kid, and thought, geez, it would be really cool to have a bigger, cooler version of something that I did like as a kid. So I'm really happy to have this thing. Happy to have it in the original box. This thing is just fun to play, and if you go back to the beginning of this video and watch that original commercial, which is the first commercial from 1978, I believe, you'll notice something missing in that commercial, and that's children. This wasn't necessarily a children's toy. Of course, they meant for children to be able to play it. It says ages 7 to adult on the box, but they marketed it to everybody. And to me, that's how any toy should be considered. If you enjoy playing with something, there should be no shame in that. And I certainly enjoy playing with this. It's fun to play, like the colors, the incandescent lights, the pleasant sounds. It's all very, very nice, and I like it very much. If you want one of these, like I said, eBay has over 100, I think, last time I checked. About half of them with the original box. Super easy to get these working perfect shape, original box. My unit that I paid $26 for, that was about middle of the road, because of course it's got the little black marks on a couple of the lenses, and the box is obviously seen a bit of age-related degradation, but it works fine. You can get one that's in a bit rougher shape, maybe corroded battery terminals or something, for as little as $10. Or you can get one that's absolutely pristine box, everything, for maybe $50. People try to list these for way more than that. Don't pay that price for them. These are so common. As usual, people will put, rare in the title of the listing and stuff. Milton Bradley sold a gajillion of these. They are not rare. So many of them still exist, right back to the original 1978 run, and these don't really break unless they've had leaking batteries put in them. They're just extremely reliable devices, and if there's a burned out bulb or something, very easy to fix. So yeah, super easy, super cheap to get one of these. I like it better than the one they make today, although the one they make today is a pretty cool and worthy successor nonetheless. But there you go. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I do have to take a moment to thank my Patreon subscribers. They more or less paid for this, as well as the other vintage toys that I've been reviewing on YouTube recently. I save up my Patreon money until I find something that I decide I want and that I can put back into the channel as a video that I think lots of people would like to watch. So really thankful to my Patreon subscribers. They make clicking that buy it now button a bit less guilt-ridden. So I'm just very thankful for that. And to them and everyone else, thank you, and I will see you next time. Simon calls your bluff, Buzz, and then he sleeps with your wife.